welcome. My name is Christine Kennedy, and on behalf of the Office of Alumni Engagement and the McMaster Continuing Education, I'd like to thank you for joining us for another talk in our Caregiving Essentials webinar series. Today, we're thrilled to have Dr. Hsien Seow and Samantha Winemaker, otherwise known as Sammy, two palliative care specialists who are going to talk today about their interactive workbook applying the 7 keys for navigating a life-changing diagnosis. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which this webinar is taking place at McMaster University is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee Nations and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. So as always, Donna Thompson is here to moderate our discussion. Donna is a caregiver, author, and educator. She is the author of 2 best-selling books on caregiving, including The Unexpected Journey of Caring. Donna also facilitates the free online courses for caregivers, Caregiving Essentials, and she is the co-designer of the Creating Caregiver-Friendly Workplaces and co-designer and co-instructor of the Family Engagement and Research course, all of which are held here at McMaster. And now our guest speakers. So we have Dr. Hsien Seow, who is the Canadian Research Chair in Palliative Care and Health Systems Innovation, and he's a professor here at McMaster in the Department of Oncology. And Dr. Sammy Winemaker is a palliative care physician who cares for patients with serious illnesses and their families in the home. She's also an associate clinical professor here at MAC in the Department of Family Medicine, Division of Palliative Care. And for those of you who really know our speakers today, well, they are the creators of the Waiting Room Revolution, which is a revelation because it provides lots of wonderful resources. They have articles, podcasts, resources. So if you're not familiar with that, I strongly suggest you hit online the Waiting Room Revolution, and we'll put a link for that in the chat. So you have access to that. Anyway, you don't want to hear me talk. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Hsien, Donna, and Sammy, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Christine.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here with two of my favorite people in the world, Hsien and Sammy. And I just want to say before we begin that the discussion that we're having today and all of the incredible public-facing work that you both have done for patients and families in Canada and internationally, this is not only for palliative care patients. It's such a guide for living. And I think that the 7 keys that you've identified can be applied to any life challenge generally. And I think maybe we can talk another day about writing just another book about that. But today we're going to focus in on patients who receive a very serious, diagnosis of a critical illness and how to move forward with that. Particularly, we're going to be looking at the lens of the family and the family caregiver today, and how we can use the tools and resources that you both have developed in making that journey more manageable, less chaotic. And I'd like to begin today by asking you both. We'll start with you, Hsien, because you were telling me a story just when we had dinner recently. We were together at the Canadian Centre for Caregiving Excellence conference. And you told me a story about what brought you to this field. Can you share that with us? How did you ever become interested in this area of research?
Yeah, thanks, Donna, and great to be with you, and everyone here. Yeah, you know what? I think for many people, and we know caregiving is going to become a universal experience, but when you walk onto the scene, you feel like it's an individual experience. It's your first time. So my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was quite young, when I was 6 years old, and our family stepped onto that conveyor belt of healthcare, the cancer journey. It happened to be for us, and we were on a roller coaster, ups and downs, and treatment and remission and treatment and recurrence, etc. And we really didn't know what to expect. And we felt like we were just at the whim of a health system that was doing its best, but we didn't, we were lost a bit and living day to day in a way. And when she did eventually, you know, die from breast cancer, 4 years later, I was 10 years old. I thought I would go into medicine like Sammy and, maybe find a cure for cancer. As it turned out, my life path was a bit different. It turned out that as I got into um, school and I started to decide what I wanted to do, I was much more interested in how systems affected the outcomes and how our health system or our social systems are perfectly designed to create the outcomes it produces. And I think we have lost the patient and family in our care system. And so I hear from patients and families in the cancer center where I work that they also feel lost and don't know what to expect. And that's really what drove me to this work in this field of palliative care and to partner with Sammy to try to make the experience better. While, a lot of important work is happening on trying to find cures and treatments, I think we're really focused on improving the quality of life and the experience for patients and families.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think, palliative care is where care lives in medicine. It is really about caring relationships and making people feel that they can live the best lives they can, even with serious illness.
Mhm.
Sammy, can you tell us what brought you to palliative medicine and maybe even what brought you to work with Hsien in this mission?
Mhm. Well, thanks, Donna. When I was in medical school, I had two young children, and family medicine was tantalizing for me for a variety of important reasons and practical reasons. But while I was in family medicine, I happened to do a 1 month rotation in this thing I'd never heard about, certainly hadn't heard about it in medical school. Um, but I was able to opt out of another month of internal medicine and pick something from a list of things. And I would have picked anything, honest to God, to get out of another rotation in internal medicine. And so I picked this thing called palliative care, and it changed my life. I didn't even know what the rotation was going to be about until I went through it. And it was like a lightning striking me that in my entire training, I had never been part of a practice of care that resonated with the reasons why I went into medicine. The reasons why I became a doctor were echoed very strongly in this rotation I did in palliative care, and I never looked back. And I, to this day, see that in the students that join me in my clinical work, students who might be medical students, or they might be residents, or they might be later in their training, when they come and do a rotation in palliative care, it is like an awakening. They remember why they went into healthcare, which is wonderful in a way. And on the other hand, it's sort of, you know, head scratching and alarming that there's something lost in training that they get reintroduced to in palliative care. So that's my journey and how I got into palliative care and how Hsien and I ended up working together as we worked alongside each other for a while, just because palliative care is a small field. But then the two of us, not knowing that each other was the same frustrating experience, we're finding Hsien in his research and me in my clinical work that we kept seeing the same pain point over and over families that we would see, each of them different people, different names, different diagnoses, but the experience wasn't getting any better. Year after year of us being in this field, trying to improve the illness experience in very traditional ways by teaching healthcare providers and trying to change the system. Still, at the level of the patient and family, things were not changing. And so Hsien and I ended up on a committee together, and that committee was going to be that committee that we were going to change everything. And guess what? We didn't do change anything. But we became super close and then decided over coffee one day, we need to pivot and look straight at the public and try to influence the public to come to their illness experience with a different vibe and a different mojo, more respectfully activated, and that was going to be the thing that moves the dial. And so
Mhm.
that's the long and the short of it. That was too long. Sorry, Donna.
Yeah, no, no, no. It's it makes it so interesting when you see something that's just wrong in
Mhm.
society. You ask yourself, who are the change agents
Mhm.
here? And it's very interesting how you at first looked at the medical community or the medical education community or the system itself. Something needs to change within the system. And then you sort of said, no, it's not going to
Mhm.
happen. People are too entrenched or for whatever reason holding on to um, traditional ways that
Mhm.
are not helpful to patients and families. So
Mhm.
we're going to get the public to
Good.
to
Yeah.
really change the language and the mindset and the experience. And by extension, the system will be changed.
I
And
just got chills. It happens every time.
it's just, so do I.
Yeah.
I do too. You know, Together, I think we care so deeply about care in healthcare
Mhm.
and the ways and means that it's been sacrificed
Mhm.
at the altar of efficiencies.
Yes.
And so we need to reclaim
Yes.
um, the idea of a caring healthcare system, and we can have it, we can get it if
Mhm.
we follow your path that you have laid out so beautifully for all of us.
Mhm.
So you have identified 7 keys
Mhm.
to better traveling that illness journey.
Mhm.
Tell us about those keys.
Perfect. I'm going to pull up a slide. And I
Mm.
know, Sammy, before we talk about the 7 keys, do you want to just talk a little bit about how we came up with these?
Yes, I do. Okay. We've worked together long enough. Okay, let me tell you where these 7 keys came from. Hsien and I spent years realizing at some point that we had all the information we needed. We just weren't looking in the right place. So Hsien had done all this data research, and I had so many patient and family stories, thousands of them over the years, that all we had to do was put different glasses on and see if we could find some signals in the research that Hsien had done and in the stories that I had received. And very quickly, there were signals. One of the signals that we got is that patients and families, people and their families, when they get a diagnosis or start interacting with the healthcare system, go through an illness, they end up either in the dark or in the know. And this was a strong theme that came out from our harvesting of the data that we had. So, for some reason, the majority of people that end up patients and caregivers, they go through their illness experience feeling in the dark, which is mostly an experience that is
Overwhelming.
chaotic, overwhelming. It can be scary. It's anxiety provoking. People feel a loss of control, a loss of personhood. They don't recognize themselves in their own illness experience. And there's this relinquishing to the system, their agency. Um, and that's an awful way to go through an illness experience. The system sucks them into this kind of riptide of being in the dark. And then there was a small portion of in the know. So they got through seemingly unscathed. Their experience was polar opposite. They felt they recognized themselves as a unique person and family, that they felt more in control. They felt grounded. They felt they had information. They felt they were moving through the system proactively and planning ahead. They felt hope. They felt, that they were not helpless. this was fundamentally two different illness experiences. And so we ended up doing a little more mining of the data, and we determined that there were 7 differences between the two groups. And it didn't matter if the illnesses were the same in each group, that these 7 differences would make or break whether or not people ended up in the dark or in the know. And we called them 7 keys because well, they could be 7 mindsets, 7 skills, seven differences between the two groups. But we call them keys because they unlock the secrets to having an in the know illness experience. And so this is where the 7 keys came from.
So I think, Donna, what we'll do is we'll just talk about the 7 keys really briefly because I know you have a lot of other questions. But these 7 keys, like Sammy said, were uh, the keys to being in the dark and in the know, and they're really metaphors and actions that patients, families, and healthcare providers, but we're really talking about caregivers and families here, that they could initiate at any point in the illness journey. And the first one um, is called Walk Two Roads. It was the idea that even though we live in a society where everyone wants to be positive and hope for the best, we can hope for the best and plan for the rest at the same time. And we call that skill walking two roads. And that planning for the rest does not dishonor hope.
Mhm. The second key that made a difference for people being in the dark or in the know was this idea we call zooming out. So people who were in the dark, they spent a lot of time in the busyness of the system and their illness, the day-to-day, what we call the weather of their illness. And the people who were in the know did that as well, but they were able to extract the big picture, which we call zooming out of their illness that they've been diagnosed with. Because we know that every illness has a roadmap that they are getting the diagnosis for the first time, but because zillions of people have had a particular diagnosis, let's say like Parkinson's has a well mapped out storyline, a general roadmap. So people who were in the know were able to rise above their illness and somehow get the information that gave them the big picture view of their illness, where they came from, where they're at, and what to expect going forward. Those people were more in the know.
Yeah. And we also realized people who are in the know, they had a good sense of their style. And what we mean by that is when you get an illness, sometimes you feel like that illness defines you and is sort of will be the lead of your experience. But we recognize that everyone was different, and actually people have their own style and their own way of facing challenges and their own way of living their life. And when they leaned into that information, that intel, that would actually tell them a lot about the kinds of ways they would sort of how this illness would play out for them. And so we people knew their style and leaned into that and sort of mixed and matched their coping mechanisms that worked well for them and, partnered up with people who had, complementary coping mechanisms. So that as a team, they worked well together. And that was really about their style. Knowing their style allowed everyone to have realistic expectations, but also to reclaim some of that strength and control because all of us have faced challenges in the past in different ways, and those are strengths that we can, that will play out in their illness.
Mm-hmm. And the fourth difference was this idea of customize your order. So people who really knew themselves well in terms of what was most important to them and what they value and what they believe in and what they wouldn't trade off for anything, what they hold dear to their heart. They knew that so well that every time they came to the healthcare system, it's almost like they presented themselves as unique. This is who I am. And they could use that information to help them make decisions along the way, as we say, nip and tuck the illness experience so that they don't feel like they're going through like a cookie cutter situation. They don't want to feel like they're part of a factory. They want to feel unique. So knowing your style and customizing your order were 2 keys that gave people a reassurance that they were going to remain themselves through their illness experience.
Hmm. And then expecting the ripple effects will be no surprise to anyone on this call because it was the recognition that when the person with the illness is sort of has the spotlight on them, but there's a ripple effect on their family, their chosen family, and we called it their inner crew. The people around them, including their community, would they go on a parallel illness journey, and they needed to recognize that the the inner crew also had to walk these 7 keys and needed as much information because they counted too. Oftentimes they didn't know the role, the job description, and what was expected of them, or that they needed to talk about this and get support for themselves. So we
Mhm.
just said those who were more in the know recognize the ripple effect and work together as a team.
Mhm. And those who are in the know, they take on a managerial type of role when there's an illness, and we call that connect the dots. So connecting the dots is the skill of keeping organized, having a way to be almost like a carrier pigeon between the private world of the patient and family and the healthcare system. The people who had a piece of paper and a pen are people who would fall into the connect the dots type of person. So they had an active role in managing, coordinating, navigating the system, and didn't just assume that that was all going to be done for them.
Yeah, and built and found resources in their local system like compassionate communities and such. And last but not least, those who were more in the know knew how to invite themselves. This is about finding your voice, initiating conversations about what to expect. Don't wait to be invited into the conversation. If they had questions, they brought them forward. And we say they were more they weren't aggressive, but they were respectfully assertive. They were gently fierce. They had to be because passive patients, quiet patients, the good patients, those didn't always get the answers they needed, and it was easy for them to get lost. So
Mhm.
those 7 keys, believe it or not, Donna, took us a long time to come up with the right language that was palatable for the public at any point in their illness. As you can see, it's not just about uh, end of life, where we often are positioned, but any illness, any time in an illness journey, um, or anytime you get a life-changing illness, these skills apply.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And thank you for that fantastic explanation of the keys. Um, and I'm just reflecting as I'm looking at them and listening to you describe them, that of course the person with a diagnosis is always the North Star of, this is the central person who is having the experience. But in the context of caregiving and families, um, these keys equally apply to the family caregiver too, don't they?
Mhm.
And you've certainly had lots of caregivers as guests talking about
Mhm.
the keys and how they affect the caregiver and the family. Um,
Mhm.
guests on the waiting room revolution.
Mhm.
And the other thing that strikes me too is as just I'm reflecting a little bit more on how these keys would help with family dynamics
Mhm.
moving through an illness journey, that dependency and illness really messes with um, relationships and who takes the lead. Oh,
Mhm.
my husband makes all the decisions, or who who depends on whom for what
Mhm.
as time goes on within family dynamics. That can be thrown up, blown up,
Mhm.
can't it?
Yeah, I mean, in many ways it can, but in many ways things surprisingly stay the same. Like, the saying, you die as you live, right?
Yes.
So the dynamics that exist with, amongst people in a family unit, their coping mechanisms, the pain points, all these things. My overwhelm is that many of these things are actually amplified in an illness journey. Um, some things can change. For example, if the one person in the family is the one who's things and that person become and someone else has to step up and take on the role. Certainly, those types of things can change. But the actual dynamics, personalities, the traits of the people, their terms of engagement with each other, I find that surprisingly, that stuff stays resilient for good or bad. Like it's not all good. um, but but that allows a certain predictability to to the illness journey. Do you know what I mean? Like I know, I used to joke, not joke, but I used to lament that I don't know what I'm going to be like when at some point in the future I get my illness, you know? Um, but you know what? I do know. I actually do know because I know me and I know that I have had challenges in the past and I know exactly where I fare well and where I fall short. And I know what serves me well and what doesn't. And I can say the same for how my husband is going to be. Like I know how he operates. I know how we operate. So surprisingly, I sort of know when one of us gets something or both there is some predictability to how we're going to maneuver through things. But I think we don't harness that and learn from that and anticipate that so that we can mitigate or exploit some of the good and the bad, right?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's, every caregiver who's listening today will um, be plagued with this question of what if I get sick? I'm just not supposed to get sick. And I'm so used to looking after other people, and I don't know how to look after myself or even to think in terms of we
Mhm,
or me, sorry, in
mhm,
terms of me as
mhm,
opposed to us,
mhm,
together. So as you guys know, last April 15th, I received a diagnosis of a serious illness. Um, my doctor called me and I was driving, and he said, I have some news from your tests,
mhm,
and do you want me to call you back when you get home? And I said, no, 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 no. I'll pull over
mhm,
um, and tell me what this is. And he told me that I had a high grade
mhm,
type of bladder cancer.
mhm,
And so I was very calm, or I thought I sounded calm,
mhm,
but I was sort of watching myself, listening to myself from a distance almost.
mhm,
And I looked in my purse for a piece of paper to write down what he told me. And then I said, thank you very much. I'll be in touch, and I suppose that we'll find out what the treatment plan looks like. And then I got home about 5 minutes later.
mhm,
I could not remember anything he said. I could not read my writing.
mhm,
And I had to call the doctor's office and say, he just called me and he told me something, but I don't know what it was.
mhm,
And I had to keep Googling this thing. I could not remember the name of it.
mhm,
And I remember saying to you, Hsien, or maybe it was you, Sammy, that
mhm,
I felt at the beginning like um, somebody said, go stand at the edge of that deep pit, and you can't see the bottom, it's black,
mhm,
and you need to jump in.
mhm,
And we can't tell you anything other than that. You need to jump in. And
mhm,
I said, okay, I do. But I really want, if you could just give me, like, there's a root over there that I could hold on to,
mhm,
or something that is known about the fall, some architecture, some roadmap. And I've said that to you. And then you sent me this,
mhm,
my workbook. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, because this is my guide and my husband's guide.
mhm,
And I think it's going to be helpful today to look at just what I wrote in it, for example.
Mhm.
I've filled it in pencil, just because I guess that's what was at hand. But you know, I work in caregiving all the time, think about caregiving all the time,
Mhm.
and I didn't know myself
Mhm.
that well.
Mm,
And I just thought, this can't be me. Ask me about my family members that I care for. I can tell you all of their medications. I can tell you everything. But um, I just, I wrote reflection. What different you've offered a prompt here, for example. What different emotions have you felt along your illness journey so far? What are you most worried about?
Mhm.
mm,
These are very fundamental questions
Mhm.
that I would not have otherwise asked myself.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I wrote down, I have felt fear and lack of control.
Mhm.
Cancer feels random and like, what else is in store? I
Mhm.
wrote that down. And my worst fear, pain and suffering with major surgery,
Mhm.
chemo.
mm,
Mhm.
And, in the dark, I rated myself whether I'm in the dark or in the know. And most of the values are about in the middle.
Mhm.
Um, oh, sorry, my phone. Hopefully you can't hear that.
no.
Um, but I think, this book I gave to my husband as well.
Mhm.
And I said, look at my answers, and we need to talk about um, what I wrote down and how I feel,
Mhm.
because he told me how he felt, and it was very different. For
Mhm.
Mm,
example, I said, I want to tell everybody about this. And he said, I don't want you to tell anyone.
Mhm.
I'm not ready
mm,
for that.
mhm.
So talk to us about some of these prompt questions that you have, and what happens if people have wildly different answers to these questions
Mhm.
in the family? What can be done about that?
Mhm.
Okay, that's a really good question. Donna, thank you for sharing your story um,
Mhm.
and actually for being one of our very biggest cheerleaders at the beginning. And if I can just take a step back, because there's been a couple questions in the chat. So I just want to, and then I'll let Sammy take Donna's question. But just very briefly, someone asked, you have these seven keys. How are we sharing it with the world, and how are we engaging professionals? And what we did is we actually started a podcast, The Waiting Room Revolution. That is the name of the podcast. It's on all podcast platforms. Sammy and I were really talking to each other to get our ideas out. But for the last 5 years, it's been in the top 1% of global podcasts. And as Donna was one of our earliest guests in season two. And anyway, that's how we met. So that was one of the ways where we shared this information for free. People can listen. Season one has the seven keys, and we're now in season 12, and lots of guests. We wrote the book, Hope for the Best, Plan for the Best. This white book, which explains the key, because not everybody listens to a podcast, and it came out 2 years ago and is a bestseller, and people, a lot of patients and families love it because they say it it was very plain language, or yeah, it was very clear and simple, and we have stories and actions to implement these keys for yourself. And as we went around, people said it helped them get unfrozen, and it gave them a framework for how to navigate this illness. Like, what am I supposed to do now that I've been labeled a patient or a caregiver? And as we've been going around, we had a lot of questions, and people said, "I wish there was a workbook." And so that's where we just launched this workbook, May of this year on National Caregivers Day, actually, and that was when you came in June, and we sent you one of the first copies of the workbook we had. And so I'll just pause there so that people know this is how we shared it. And there was another question about, even though we were introduced as palliative care, what we learned where these seven keys were a way to leach out a palliative approach to care, which is really just the best care possible, or care where the person is at the center of care. That's what a palliative approach really is. How to leach it out from the system, from an uncomfortable system. So even if you never met Sammy, or were labeled palliative, or referred to a palliative care unit, because that happens very late in an illness, you can get person-centered care, human-centered care right from the moment of diagnosis by using these seven keys. That is our that is what the rating revolution is all about. So I just wanted to put that context for people. And maybe I'll just do this last slide. This is our website, waitingroomrevolution.com. It has a whole bunch of free tools, an ambassador program, and et cetera, that people can check out on their own time. And I won't share any more slides, but just so people know, our revolution is really a global social movement. It's not just a book or a workbook, but people have found those tools very helpful. So maybe I'll pass it to Sammy to answer the question of, how people, what people have said about the workbook, and if people have different opinions, how do you navigate that?
Mhm. Well, you're explaining that, see, and I keep thinking to myself, I hope I don't forget the question that Donna asked, but it was when when different people have different ideas about the way forward. Uh,
Yeah.
and Donna, that is, again, thank you for sharing. I will say that when you emailed us that you were diagnosed with cancer, it was like took my breath away. Um, but that's to be expected, and we just so appreciate you sharing the things that served you well in your journey, and inviting us today to share with everyone else. It's very generous. um, you know every everyone in their crew, so their chosen family, the caregivers, the people that are in the inner circle of the person with the diagnosis, we are all different people to begin with. I'm not the same as my sister, um, or my brother, or my mom, or my husband, my two daughters. We're all very different people. So it would be expected that when I get my illness, that we're going to have different opinions about going through this. Um, you know, my husband perhaps won't want to talk a lot about it. He's more naturally a quiet, private person. I need to talk about it. And so my needs that way will be different than his. And just because I'm the one with I'm the patient with the diagnosis, doesn't mean that my husband has to fall in line with my vibe, because that's not natural for him. So somehow we need to acknowledge that everyone on Team Sammy, when I get my illness, um, has a right to their own style. And that the goal is not to force everyone to be the same or the same style as the patient, but we need to recognize and appreciate and learn how to work as a team around me and the diagnosis, but everyone get their unique ways, acknowledged and satisfied. It's okay, I guess, is what I'm saying, for people to have different ideas about that. And no one really wins in these scenarios. It's just how to manage our different styles is really the question.
Yeah, it is the question,
Yeah.
particularly how to manage, and people have put this in the chat as well, um, how to manage when ongoing grief is a part of the experience, grief, loss, which can often lead to denial. We hear this a lot in caregiving families where, say, if you have siblings caring for a parent or something, um, and there's a situation of Alzheimer's or another disease of uh, progressive loss,
Mhm.
um, that, you'll have one sibling who just says, "Oh, mom's fine."
Mhm.
And another sibling who will say, "Well, seriously, she's not. And we need to deal with this, and
Mhm.
we need as a family to get on the same page."
Mhm.
Mhm.
So I wonder if is there, well, someone asked this in the chat, there a think that is helpful in dealing with loss and grief that would help to get everybody on the same page if everybody filled out the workbook
Mhm.
for that
Mhm.
key?
Yeah.
I was
Like,
going to
what?
say, I mean, that's a big question, but I would say that the grief and loss absolutely is a part of the experience, and I think that's becoming more known, that, or less stigmatized, that it's not just after someone passes away, it's throughout the whole experience, really. That is, and I've been doing a lot of reading about resilience, and Lucy Hone who was just a guest a couple of weeks ago or a few episodes ago about resilient grieving is her book. But the strategies people use is really interesting of how people, live with this and move forward. But the key, okay, what we talk about when people say denial, it's a coping mechanism. This is Sammy saying it's very rare that big D denial, which means people really don't think they have something wrong with them. Little D denial is more just we think everything's fine and we don't want to go future gaze too much because it's scary, uncomfortable, etc. And so I think the first two keys, walking two roads, which ended up being the title of our book, hoping for the best and planning for the rest, not the worst, planning for the rest is really the opening for people to acknowledge that there is hope, but there's also planning that have to coexist. What we're planning for might differ based on what we want to talk about, but that is zooming out, which is the understanding of where we are in the illness and what we might think is likely to happen. And not everybody wants to plan all the way to the end stage or the late chapters. They just might want to plan for this stage. But the zooming out is that roadmap. And even if we don't agree on, how stable the person is, we can agree that there will be change. And there will be change. And what are the things that we're prepared for and not prepared for? I think that's where this walking two roads and zooming out go hand in hand, and they're the most important pieces to at least have a conversation to start. These are all conversation starters. Go ahead, Sammy.
Yeah, I find that most of the trouble we run into within families, everyone being on different pages, let's just say, um, is because no one's really invited them to, you know, a good discussion about what their illness understanding is. And so when I'm in situations where the brother, the sister, the cousin, the mother, the patient, everyone's on like a different, you know, I usually start with how much do you understand about this illness that you have? Um, who here is the kind of person who likes information? How much detail would you like? And then I start sorting out who's in the room. Is everyone wanting this or not wanting it? But you'd be surprised most times, no matter what characters are in the room, most people say, I would like to know more about this illness. That would be helpful. No one's ever asked us if we wanted that information. No one's given us that information. And that's where we find people scrambling. A son saying, no, it's not happening. And a daughter saying, yes, it is happening. And we have to do this. It's because no one's invited them to zoom out. Um, and get grounded in the scaffolding of what this illness looks like. Because if you can describe the illness like dementia, then the siblings will begin to look at their mom, let's say, and say, okay, I see her now in that illness. That makes sense to me now that you've described those chapters. Oh, I'm suddenly realizing mom's in this chapter. So the private, shy, denial kind of person might not, it might not change what they say, but inside they'll have a better appreciation of this weather, the climate of this dementia illness, and conflict will be lessened. So getting people on the same page about the big picture of the illness is a critical step.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, sorry, Donna, I know it's just that what Sammy's doing is she's connecting what people are seeing and connecting she calls it makes meaning of the changes we're seeing. Because we might see changes, but just think, oh, we'll bounce back. Like, I got the cold, now I'm back to normal. That's what we all would love. But if you knew this was the pattern, then you can make meaning of these are the changes I was expecting, and now I'm seeing them, and I know what that means, and therefore this is what I have to do. That's the piece, the meaning making that doesn't happen often, and that's the missing piece to get people on the same page. Go ahead.
Mhm. And I'm thinking too, just looking at some of the comments in the chat, that this same strategy, the same reflection around walking two roads, zooming out, could be a tool for the family caregiver to
Mhm.
understand that how, in what way, in what way am I not going to be subsumed by my caregiver role?
Mhm.
Walking two roads could be me and her, or me,
Yes.
him,
Yes.
too, as well.
Mhm.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, and zooming out, look at myself as a separate person. I just think these frameworks are so
Mhm.
amazing. And I think too, one thing I noticed last week was I revisited a lot of the things that I'd written down in the book, and
Mhm.
I had written them months earlier,
Mhm.
and I've changed.
Mm.
I've changed.
Okay.
So I'm now realize like aha moment that I need to keep revisiting these questions as I move through.
Yes.
So
Yes.
like I wrote at first, the reflection was, do you feel pressure to be constantly positive? Is
Mhm.
there anything you wish you could talk about? And I wrote, no, I feel empowered to share. And at that time, it was with my closest
Mhm.
Mm.
family, my sister, um, and my best girlfriends. I
Mhm.
could talk to them about anything.
Mhm.
And little harder with my husband, but
Mhm.
he's coming along.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then I wrote, last week I wrote, although if I have a recurrence, I don't know how I'll feel,
Mm.
you know, because like
Mhm.
the doctor said, yeah, it's 50-50. You're likely to have a recurrence, but he also said, like, don't worry because we're looking at you all the time. And there was something else I wanted to share too. Um, oh, yes. Information seeking style. How do you like to have tender conversations? Do you want them sugar coated or straight up?
Mhm.
Planning into the future. Do you plan day to day or are you a super planner? Um, and I'm a super planner, but I didn't put four, which was the max.
Mhm.
I put three because I'm a bit afraid,
Mhm.
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 you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
So that may change the more I get to know my illness.
Mhm.
Yeah.
If I do have a recurrence and I get through it just fine,
Mhm.
I might then put a four because, like, now I'm not afraid of anything. So,
Yeah.
worst that happened, it's fine, you know?
Totally.
Yeah. So, I just wanted to point that out to people. And, the questions prompts that you
Mhm.
offer, again, for everybody in the family, explore what makes you unique. Take some time to reflect and write down your answers to the following questions. What matters most to you and why? Um, and what brings you joy? I wrote what matters most to you and why. My family, my work, my fitness,
Mhm.
my friends.
Mhm.
Mm.
What brings you joy? All of the above, music and dancing and nice clothes.
Mm.
But that is really important information.
So
Yeah,
Yeah.
honest.
I mean, we crack up about it, right? But the truth is that's what makes you Donna. And,
Yeah.
you know, and those are the things you're going to think about when you have to make big decisions. Like,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
it's going to
And
affect
I am not going to be a sick person without a good wardrobe that makes me feel like I have armor on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you need your red lipstick. And so
Yes.
that's just the way you are. I mean, I have friends, I know exactly what we need to do because they would write down similar things. But
Yeah.
yeah, so writing in the book is a way to sort of get to know yourself a little bit better. As you said, you've asked yourself, why am I a three on this one? And why am
Mhm.
I not
Mhm.
a four? Can also be a communication tool between two people. If you get your
Yes.
partner to also score, and then no one's right or wrong, it just opens up reflection and conversation.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you sharing with us that you revisited the workbook because I think that's something we didn't really think too much about. We were so busy getting the workbook out there and that people should try it out. But this
Yeah.
idea of revisiting it is fantastic. That
Yeah.
one, sorry, Sam, that one exercise that you mentioned about am I a super seeker or am I this? That is in Know Your Style chapter. That's one of my favorite exercises in the workbook because I think it allows people to score themselves on certain traits that will have an influence on your illness experience, whether you're a planner, whether you are future gazing or not, whether you're organized. I don't know how many we have there, maybe 10 or 12. And we purposely did not put a score out of 5 because we knew people would want and be tempted to put 3 down the middle. So it sort of forces someone to pick sort of what side they're on. And then when you turn the page, we give you the how to decipher your number. So if you're leaning all your numbers to the left side or the right side, what does that mean for you in terms of how likely you're going to be in the dark or in the know? And so I love that exercise. I'm happy you brought that one up.
Yeah. And, I can see we're coming to the end, which drives me crazy because we just could speak about so many more things. But I wanted to ask you, um, the in terms of working with your healthcare providers, your doctors, even your home care nurses, if you have home care nursing, what about have you spoken to people who've used the workbook to explain to the doctor, for example, how you're feeling or what
Yeah.
you want to know that you don't know?
Yeah. So I just wanted to say that I think the thread through this, or in my mind, was that information is power. And this first book, before we had a workbook, was all about information. That is the thing that we can control as patients and caregivers and families, is we can get as much information as much as we want to make sense and to be as informed as possible. That is what gives people choice and control. And in this white book, we had family shout outs. In fact, we had a long discussion with our publisher about whether this book should be for caregivers only, but we made it to the patient. It says, dear, I think it says, dear reader, but there's family shout outs, and it's really all applicable to the families. And in this workbook, we wrote it to both, really, because the exercises are for both, and they are conversation starters or exercise. And there are exercises specific to caregivers about caregiver respite and burnout, particularly. There's ones that are just designed for caregivers. And we actually put in QR codes so that it goes to a page that you can print out. So we knew there were 9 exercises that we expected people to revisit, especially. And do again because things change. So that's one of the features of this workbook. But to answer your question about what have we heard from people, the whole book culminates into one exercise at the end called My Big Picture, which puts all 7 keys on one page, like a patient CV. And we've done workshops where we went through the 7 keys, and they filled out that final exercise, and people introduced themselves with that My Big Picture, and it talked about what was important to them, who they were, what they understood, how they liked information, and basically how they wanted to be treated by the system. It put them in the driver's seat. And so, short of we've had people buy this book and give it to their oncologist, et cetera. These exercises, any one of them could be, photocopied or pulled out, or, the QR codes, and used to be shared with their providers to say, this is what you need to know to give me the best care possible, et cetera. And that has changed the conversation. That's what people have said, from transactional care to relational care. And again, putting putting the human back at the center of care.
Oh, absolutely. I loved that chapter in the book, and so that informed me absolutely to do my own patient CV for the first time that I met um, the
Mhm.
doctor who was going to be my primary.
Yeah.
And I put a picture of our family, and then I said, "My name is Donna. I have 2 grown kids. This is my husband, Jim, and we have a dog called a golden retriever called Daisy.
Mhm.
And this is what I care about. This is my work, and we, we love being outside, and we usually spend the month of March in a tiny island in the Bahamas. I told him all this stuff,
Mhm.
and he said, and this is so that's what I care about. This is what I'm most worried about. These are what I think my strengths are. And I told him I want all the information in that paper. and it was just a page and a half. And he read it and he said, I have a dog called Daisy too.
Mm.
And mine's a Shih Tzu. And I thought, okay, great. We're just bonded in the first 3 minutes.
You connected, yeah.
Yeah.
And now he
Yeah,
sees you as a
so
person and not, you
Do you know
know?
what you did, Donna? You very skillfully, like I love when you told us that. You skillfully put lightning through that clinician's heart. The same thing that happens when residents come and spend time doing palliative care, or when I did palliative care, it's a jolt. Oh my God, I forgot that this is exactly why I went into this, because this person in front of me, Donna Thompson, is like a person. And I have now just like been jolted out of my robothood and and I'm now you touched the human core of your clinician, and I think that that is a strategy to get what you need. It's genius.
yeah, it is true. Like he was really like I think I'm his favorite
Of course you are.
now. Yeah, so he
No,
knows
but that's how we
about
want,
me.
no, that's what we want all our healthcare providers to feel not special, but
Yeah.
seen
Yes.
and
Yeah,
important,
that's
and
right.
that you're a person and
Yeah,
not
and I see him too.
exactly
So
100%.
Yeah.
Donna, your respectfully assertive way about you, your style, is getting you what you need, and it
Yeah.
will continue to do that, no matter what.
Yeah, I hope so. But I before we have to go, oh my goodness, it's 12:59. Um, could you just give us a quick word about the wonderful new ambassador program that you've begun for this
Yes,
work?
thank you, Donna. Yeah, if people are interested, waitingroomrevolution.com. You can go to our website. It will have information about everything we talked about today. There's free links to our podcast. We have one-page downloads, those some of these roadmaps. And one of the newest circles is our ambassador program. If you click on that, you can read about um, like Donna is an ambassador. She's a person who wants to share the seven keys with communities like yourselves. And so we have created materials to help that are freely available to be an ambassador, and the kit is available to share these seven keys because the information belongs to the people. Um, and that is how we're going to change the human experience. So you can learn about the ambassador program on our website, but find all tons of free resources and such, and join our list, our newsletter, etc. Um, and yeah, and welcome to the revolution, everyone, because this is how we're going to see change in the system.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much. What a delight it always is to speak with you. I feel goosebumps and I feel energized. And of course, I want to be an ambassador for
Mhm.
your work for the rest of my life. So thank you
Thank you.
very much
Thank
for
you.
today.
I'm going to change my background to an armchair. I'm going to get some red lipstick for the next one we do together. Okay.
Okay.
Her signature look. Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you. Over to you, Christine.
Oh, thank you, everyone. What a wonderful conversation. And thank you to everyone who's sharing. Some people have shared in the chat that they have their own diagnoses, like Donna. We're so happy that everyone could attend. And for some people are saying it's their first time and they're really thankful for all the information that is being presented. So that is what we're here. We're here to build a community. And I have to say, like, I am so proud that Hsien and Sammy are part of the McMaster community. It makes me feel really positive that this is what McMaster researchers do, right? We are going out into the world and we're trying to make changes. And the revolution may take a while, but slowly but surely, more people that get on the bandwagon make the changes, and it will happen for everyone. So thank you to you both for joining us for an hour. Donna, thank you as always. And you always look wonderful in your red lipstick.
Mhm.
So thanks everyone for joining us. We are taking the month of December off, so we will join you, or you will join us again in January. Look for the email inviting you to that upcoming webinar. So enjoy your time, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Mhm.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.